particularly, we're going to be looking at, right now, colonial New England. We're going to be moving down to Maryland after we get back from the club fair, hopefully before we go to lunch. So, how much religious freedom did we really have in New England? Not very much at all. We called them a theocracy, which implies you don't get to decide if you're a regular person. The church leaders are the people in charge. But what's the traditional association we associate with the Pilgrims in American history?
The black hats with the belt buckles.
Yes, the black hats with the belt buckles. And where is that, right? But yes, that's the black hats with the belt buckles. And Priscilla, the good pilgrim. That's what I played in the Thanksgiving play whenever I was in 3rd grade. And we did a Thanksgiving play for all the parents. I was Priscilla, the good pilgrim that made friends with the Indians. It was great. But whenever we learn in elementary school, why did the Pilgrims come to America? Religious freedom. So a lot of folks associate with the Pilgrims religious freedom. They wanted religious freedom for themselves, but did not allow it for anybody else. Remember this guy, right? City on a hill, Winthrop. Now, he wasn't on the Mayflower. He's not one of the original Puritans, Pilgrims. But he kind of, with this sermon, kind of laid the foundation for what this New England colony in Massachusetts Bay is going to be all about. In the podcast, there's a reference to Ronald Reagan, how he takes that city on a hill reference and kind of twists it around for his own purposes. But Winthrop, with his ideas that he has with the city on the hill, and we have to be in this together, and we have to do things to please God, that does not leave any room for religious freedom. The Pilgrims came for religious freedom for themselves, but they do not allow anybody else to have religious freedom in their colony. So here's kind of a little, the most famous part of the sermon. All eyes of people are upon us. So Winthrop and the other leaders are going to try to make sure everybody is doing what they believe God wants them to do. This becomes a religious commonwealth, or in other words, a theocracy. So individualism is not what they are going for in the New England colony. This idea of we must be knit together, those documents that we just read, it was very community oriented, and everybody has to fit into the community. And if you don't fit in, bad things will happen. So, we're going to be talking about 2 folks that did not fit in, and what happens with them. We're going to start with Roger Williams. Roger Williams, he was a Puritan at first, but then things are going to kind of go awry for him. He's actually going to be the founder of the American Baptist Church. And there are a lot of Baptist churches here in our little neck of Kentucky, but there's tons of Baptist churches throughout the U.S. In fact, it's the largest religious denomination, Protestant denomination within the U.S. So, Roger Williams. Just to kind of contrast him and the Puritans, the Puritans, they want to purify the Church of England. They thought the Church of England had become a little too Catholic. And they wanted to get rid of all that Catholicism out of the Church of England. So that's why they call themselves the Puritans.
It's 11:49.
Oh, thank you. All right, so we will pause here. If you want to leave your stuff, please leave your stuff. And the name Puritans because they objected to some things within the established Church of England, which is you had to attend Church of England in England. You had to pay a tithe, like a tax, to the Church of England in England. And the Puritans, they disagreed with some of the doctrine and they wanted to purify the Church of England. They were Puritans. Separatists, which is what Roger Williams will become, is they're like, the Church of England is beyond saving. We just need to separate from it and start our own. The Church of England is too corrupt by the king or the monarch themselves, and we need to separate altogether. Now, they are both from the Calvinist foundation of the Protestant faith, the Christian faith. Calvinism, as in John Calvin, way back early in the Protestant Reformation, John Calvin set up these, thank you, Clint, you're just having a hard time over there, buddy. Get lots of exercise, though. John Calvin, a lot of the Protestants can kind of trace their heritage back to the Calvinists. If you're a Presbyterian, you're a Calvinist. Both of these groups are Calvinist as well. So, Roger Williams, separatist minister, and he believes in this idea of liberty of conscience, which is obviously going to put him at odds against the Puritans, because Roger Williams believes that the civil, and civil means state in this particular sense, the government authority should not enforce religious orthodoxy. There should not be any sort of connection between the government and the church. And obviously the Puritans, particularly Winthrop, who is going to be governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony, he is going to have a problem with this. So Roger Williams is all about this individualism, which goes against that Puritan idea. So Williams is going to get kicked out of Massachusetts Bay. That usually was the number one way the Puritans dealt with people, is they exiled them. Now, do y'all remember one of those first pictures we saw with the Pilgrims? Where they were kind of gathered together in the woods?
With the snow and...
In the snow, yep. What was one of the things that stood out in that picture?
There were some people that were walking behind them.
Yes. Yeah, they looked a little sketched, didn't they? But all the people on the outside ring, right, front and the back, what did all of them have?
Guns.
Guns for protection. So this idea of being exiled from the community is rather scary, and it's really kind of supposed to be like a death sentence without actually the good godly Puritans killing you themselves, right? You're exiled from the colony, you have to go face the wilderness alone, the Indians alone, good luck finding food, all of that. So to be exiled was a really big deal, because literally they kick you out to the wilderness and say good luck. Now, Roger Williams didn't go by himself, because there was plenty of people in the Massachusetts Bay Colony by this time. They were like, you know what, I think Roger might be right. I've had enough with Winthrop and his City on the Hill crowd. I'm going with Roger. So Roger Williams and his people are going to be exiled, and they will go into what is now Rhode Island. And he names this new settlement Providence Plantations. Providence is a word that crops up a lot in colonial America, and you hear it ever so often nowadays. But Providence is kind of a code word for God's will or God's presence. So that's why he names it Providence. And of course, the capital of Rhode Island today is Providence, Rhode Island. So God's providence, kind of like God's will, he thought that this was, all what is supposed to happen. Because he's a Calvinist. And Calvinists, there's two things that Calvinists really believe. Number one, it's predestination. This idea that God, to be God, you have to know everything and be all powerful. You have to be omnipotent. You have to know everything, see everything, be everything. That's what God is. And if God knows everything, then he knows what's going to happen. There's a verse in the Bible that the Calvinists would point to and say that God, and of course I'm paraphrasing here, God knew you in the womb, right? Before you even born, God knew you and knew what your life was going to be. So this idea of predestination, he believed that this was part of God's plan, and this had been preordained at the beginning of time that this would happen. Just to kind of drive home this idea of providence, this is Thomas Jefferson. In the Declaration of Independence, he makes reference to divine providence. So, Roger Williams does negotiate with the Indians that are already there. He makes sure he kind of buys the land from the Indians. He basically negotiates a tract of land. And he gets a charter, a written document from the King of England saying, okay, this is legit. You can settle this territory. And I'm going to back up to this slide real quick. This negotiation that he did with the Indians, 44?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The King of England said that we don't negotiate with the Indians. So whatever you told the Indians that you would be here and the Indians can have that, that's invalid. The King of England is above that, and the King of England will just take what he wants from the Indians. So he gets his land officially from the King of England, 1644, and he settles down and he starts a church. So these are the people that follow along with him after being exiled, and they do make some alliances, of course, with the Native Americans that are pictured here in this engraving. Now, the Puritans, they were always trying to baptize the Indians. Because they thought to be really saved for heaven, you had to be baptized. Roger Williams, he said that we do not baptize Indians because the Indians really don't understand this whole thing about, Jesus and being saved and all of this, so they're really not worthy of being baptized. And that was fine with the Indians because they really just wanted to be left alone anyway. But as you know, in the United States today, this whole tradition of baptism, we still see. Some churches, like the Baptist Church, they want you to go all the way under the water, right? My brother goes to a Baptist church, so whenever I visit him, I go to church with him. And they had 3 baptisms in one day. And up on behind the stage, there's like a little area that has a big old bathtub in it. And people will get dunked for everybody to see. Other Christian groups, they just think a little bit of water on the head's good enough, but the Baptists, they're all about the dunking of the people. The First Baptist Church that we see Roger Williams build, this of course is in Providence, Rhode Island, and this is way back in 1638. The Baptist Church is the first American church. All the other faiths are brought over from England or from Spain or from someplace else. The Baptist Church was born in America with Roger Williams. In fact, this one, it said created by Roger Williams on their little sign. This is not the exact same Baptist church that Roger Williams built back in the 1600s, but it's on the same location. It's been rebuilt several times, obviously, in the past 400 years. You don't need to remember this, but I thought this was pretty interesting. 15% of all Americans identify as Baptist. And there's Baptists all around the world, but obviously, since an American religion, a lot of Baptists live in the U.S. Some of the key components of these American religions, and the Puritans as well, is this idea of you need to read the Bible on your own. The Puritans brought this big idea to America that everybody has to be literate so they can read the Bible. The Puritans create the first college in America, Harvard, to train preachers. Harvard is the first college built in America. It was built by the Puritans specifically to train preachers for the Puritan church. Children will start reading at a very early age, and the one thing they read is the Bible. They don't get to read fun, fairy tale books. You read the Bible. And you open your heart and let it speak to you. You interpret it on your own. You really do not rely on the interpretation of a priest or the Pope in particular. And this is the idea of freedom of conscience. Autonomous congregations, meaning that there's not a structure like in the Catholic Church. At Catholic churches, you have an individual Catholic church, and then that church belongs in a diocese with a whole bunch of other churches, and then that diocese belongs to a higher organization, and then it's all ran by the Pope. Autonomous individual churches do their own thing. Now, modern day Baptist, there's some connectivity amongst some different Baptist churches, but most churches are still very autonomous. And then, of course, you got to be baptized. Got to be baptized to be saved. I know my granny was a Baptist. However, I went to a Presbyterian church growing up, and the Presbyterians just sprinkled the water on you. And my granny was so upset that I was not going to go to heaven because I wasn't dunked totally. And in fact, when I went to her house one summer, she took me to her church and she had me baptized by dunking me and told my parents whenever she sent me home. And it was fine. It's okay. But she was hardcore Baptist, and it don't stick unless you're totally submerged, was her idea. So Roger Williams, this is something that he talks about quite a bit. So list this in your notes with Roger Williams, please. This idea of wall of separation. This wall of separation is this idea of a separation between church and state. So the separation of church and state that we see in the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, we are talking about this idea of wall of separation, separation of church and state. You have a liberty of conscience and you can decide on your own within the church. But with the government, we see a majority rule, democratic society. You gotta go along with what the church says. All right, Roger Williams. The other most famous dissenter is this gal, Hutchinson. Bless her heart. Oh my gosh, poor Anne Hutchinson. She is going to, she's part of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. She is a very devout Puritan, and she is so devout, and she so loves reading the Bible. She starts inviting other ladies to her home to they read the Bible together. Well, the church start accusing her of being a teacher and leading these Bible studies and teaching the Bible. And that's bad, because this. Women have no place in the Puritan church. And they would quote this scripture to you, 1 Timothy, "But I suffer not a woman to teach, nor to usurp authority over a man, but to be in silence." So, as a woman, she was not allowed to lead anything within the church. So she got in trouble for that, and they told her to stop it. So then she just did it in secret. And the other thing that gets her in trouble was this idea of the Calvinist faith, and of course the Puritans are Calvinists. We've already talked about predestination and what that means. God knows what your future holds for you because God knows everything. The elect goes along with it. Since God knows everything, then it makes sense that God knows the most important thing about you. And the most important thing about you is, are you going to heaven or are you going to go to hell? The Calvinists believe that there's only a certain number of people that are going to heaven. And the people that are going to heaven are called the elect. And of course the Puritan church believes they're all the elect. And most Calvinist churches believe that if you attend there, then you must be part of the elect. So the elect, these are the people that are going to heaven. All the rest of you suckers are going to hell. Now, Anne is going to get in trouble because Anne says she has been given the gift of being able to see the elect. She says she can look at you and see if you are a member of the elect. She says that there is an aura around you that indicates you're part of the elect. And the Puritan faith, like a lot of Christian faiths, do believe that God does bestow certain gifts on people. But do you think Winthrop believes Anne Hutchinson can see the elect?
No.
Yeah, why not?
Because she's a woman.
Because she's a woman. Exactly. He would not give that special power to a woman. Of course not. So, yeah, Winthrop was like, no, you gotta go, Anne. You are just too big of a troublemaker. So, because she was trying to lead home Bible studies, because she claimed that she had the gift of being able to see the elect, she gets exiled as well. But there are plenty of people, just like with Roger Williams, that really thought Anne Hutchinson was a better preacher-teacher than Winthrop and some of the other leaders of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. And they're like, yeah, we'll go with you. So first, they go to Rhode Island because they know Roger Williams is there and, safety in numbers. But after a few months there, I think it was just under a year there, I think they spent the winter there, they keep on moving. And they actually end up in, it was called New Netherland. Nowadays it's New York. Quite specifically, New York City. She wound up in Manhattan. New York City. At this place, they called it Split Rock. And this is, it's still there today. You can go visit Split Rock. You can see the interstate signs right behind it. It's going into New York City, going into Manhattan. So that is where Anne Hutchinson and her people ended up. It did not last long. Anne and her people are going to be massacred by the Indians. And her colony is going to be wiped out. I think it's sad, isn't it?
Poor girl just wanted to teach.
I know, she just wanted to teach. And I think they made it for about 3 months, and pretty much when the Indians there were like, oh, these people aren't leaving. Because a lot of folks were just kind of moving on through. And that's what the Indians wanted. You just keep on moving on through, right? And as long as you're moving on through, they don't mess with you. But they stayed, and yeah, that's what you get. Now, there is a nice little statue up, and this is how it reads. And obviously, you don't need to list this. But it says, in memory of Anne Hutchinson, baptized in England. She was born in England, 1595. However, killed by Indians. Yeah. But she is a good example of civil liberty and religious toleration. So, even though these Puritans, these pilgrims on the Mayflower, we like to associate them with religious freedom. They only wanted religious freedom for themselves. They did not allow it for anybody else. They were all about religious conformity. Your religious freedom people are over here. Roger Williams, Anne Hutchinson, and a handful of others that we'll talk about, but mostly just kind of skip over. All right. I think that about does it for that. Yes. They were all about community as long as you fit into the community. If you didn't fit in, off you go.